Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for another week of live radio with me, your host, Kev Baker, coming to you from the very smart, the very intelligent, smart city, Glasgow. Oh, yes. It really leaves a kind of bitter taste in my mouth every time I have to declare that I live in the UK's first smart city, but I really suppose I don't have to declare anything, because absolutely everything about us here in Glasgow is already known. But enough of me moaning about living here in this globalist hellhole. There's more of this to come. I want to welcome everyone that's tuning in today, especially over there on the home of KBS at tfrlive.com. We're also going out live on iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio apps, and we're simulcasting right here on YouTube as well. So wherever you are, whenever you are, I always like to try and start to kick off the week in style. And we're certainly going to do that today because I've got a good friend to join me. And it's very, very timely indeed. Because we all know in recent times I've been kind of triggered. Yes, Kev Baker, triggered. Imagine. And it's all been to do with this whole climate chaos, the climate programming that's been going on. And in particular, one episode of which I call MK Greta. Well, tonight, as the show progresses, I'm going to roll out a new feature here on the Kev Baker Show, and it's called the SCU. Yes, the Speculation Creation Unit. I've got my own forensic lab here, and I'm going to create the most ridiculous conspiracy ever, but you're going to love it. And if nothing else, we'll get a good laugh. And it's all to do with this whole climate chaos that's going on. And can you believe it? Oh, you're not going to believe it, although you will, because this is the way things roll for yours truly, right? Getting ready for Charlie coming on today. He gives me a taste of what we're getting into. We're getting into the whole climate stuff, Greta, all the good things that are happening right now. And Charlie's going to explain who's behind it, why it's happening, what the bigger picture is. But I come to the computer, you know, the altar of KBS, fire things up, and I start looking for things to talk about, because I don't want Charlie to be kind of carrying the full show. Can't be doing that to my good friend, right? And I come across this story here, and it nearly made my eyes bleed, because Greta Thunberg is, air quotes, interested in a Glasgow climate summit role. Oh, imagine. Yes, the 16-year-old Swedish activist could speak at the COP26 event in Scotland next year. Now, I actually thought she might be coming to talk about lung disease. When I seen COP, usually my brain just goes to D because of my own condition, right? But no, well, I suppose it is kind of lung related when she's telling everyone that the world's going to be gone in a couple of years if we don't mend our ways. And it says here, teenage school strike activist Greta Thunberg could be interested in visiting Glasgow when the city hosts a climate change summit next year. The 16-year-old's team and the Swede may want to speak at COP26 in November 2020, and I'm preparing for scenes akin to that when the Pope last came to Glasgow. Yes, they'll be throwing olive leaves in her way as she takes to the streets here. But the reason I bring this up as well is because this article is a really good indicator of something I've told you time and time again in the past, and that is that Scotland, away from Westminster, and if we were ever to get our independence, it would be independence in name alone, because our government, not only are they participants, but they're proud participants in the whole globalist movement. In fact, to the point where it says here, quote, and this is the Glasgow City Council, you know, our local government saying this, it's right that the event should come to Scotland, given our global leadership on climate action. And we're sure Glasgow will deliver a highly successful conference. So imagine my delight at finding out I'm going to get to meet Greta next year. Oh, my word. That's like a meeting that's been made in heaven. It truly, truly is. So to help me get into all of this tonight and so much more, with lots of laughs along the way, because the world's ridiculous right now, and you've got to laugh or else you would cry. I've got Charlie Robinson with me. He is a good friend, and he is also the author of The Octopus of Global Control, a controversial and very, very humorous book that takes quotes from over 500 witnesses to come to history's greatest events, witnesses to some of history's greatest events, and uses them to piece together and expose a century-long plan for world domination, of which we're seeing the big push right now. And he had a front row seat to the fraud and the corruption and the shenanigans in the mortgage industry during his career in the Las Vegas casinos, real estate. And he credits John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, as the final piece of the puzzle that helped him to really see through the illusion. And it also showed him how the American government operates as the enforcement arm for multinational companies, or as I prefer to call them, the New World Order. Charlie Robinson, welcome back, my good friend. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. I'm so glad you're going to get to see our little MK Ultra Greta there.
Can you believe it, Charlie? It's almost like the universe said, how can we really trigger Kev? We know he doesn't go to Facebook anymore because he's fed up seeing the 17th letter of the alphabet and flat earth. So how do we trigger him now? Of course, they knew. Yeah.
They've got you. This is going to trigger a lot of people. And I think that, to be fair, she's being used. I think we understand this. I don't believe for a second that she just decided organically that this was going to be a thing. She was going to be a part of this whole movement. This is social engineering. It's what it is. And they're using her to push forward an agenda. It's very sad. She's somebody that needs help. She has, obviously, they've said she has Asperger's. She goes to a special school for children that have, I think how they described it, it was mental illness. That's not me saying that. That was her parents, and also the fact that the school that she was going to. So there's some real problems with this child. Not to mention, and I have empathy for her. I'm not trying to pile on and say that she's a bad person or anything like this. Like a lot of people, I think her heart is probably in the right place. I don't think she's come up with this grand, elaborate scam. She's just become a figurehead for it. But the people that are behind her, they know exactly what they're doing. They've done this before. You remember babies in the incubator? Well, who was that? That turned out she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. She was coached by Hill and Knowlton. And the whole, they were taking babies out of the incubator and leaving them to die on the cold floor was a lie. Not my opinion. Fact. That's been proven. It's been declassified. They've admitted to it. That swung the perception of the first Gulf War from, no, I don't think we should get involved, to, oh my God, we've got to do something about it. And that happened in about a week. And George H.W. Bush played on that and used that. He said that over and over again. And they were taking babies out of the incubator. He knew it was a lie. He knew it. He knew it was a lie. Obviously, it was a lie. They concocted this. This is what happens when you have a movement that isn't going well. What you do is you take somebody, you take a child, make them the focal point of this movement, especially a girl, a young girl with special needs. Who's going to criticize her, right? You'd have to be a real jerk to criticize her, and they know that. So she's marched out there as a human shield to deflect any real criticism, to deflect away from anything. And what does she say? We need action now. Just do it now. And what does that tell you? That is how you control people when you do not want them to use their critical thinking. You want them to ditch any sort of research. You want them to ditch anything having to do with the facts and just make an emotional decision. We have to save the world. It's going to end in 12 years. Where have I heard that? Oh, I don't know. Paul Ehrlich in the 70s was talking about that in his book, The Population Bomb, which was a lie. We have to do something or the world will end by 2000. That didn't happen. You've got Al Gore saying this. You've got Prince Charles saying this. You've got everybody saying this. What do they have in common? They're all part of this new world order. And you and I will get into this a little bit later about how climate change and carbon taxes and all of this meshes with this new world order agenda. They go hand in hand. It's really quite scary.
Big time, dude, big time. And of course, they even used a child before at the UN to talk about the climate back in the early 90s. And this is when I was starting to go through the early kind of brainwashing that is now full speed ahead in schools, because that was back when they were telling us initially, Charlie, that, sea levels would be rising. And I lived up in the Highlands at the time, so it really didn't concern me too much. Hills everywhere.
Right.
I'll move up the way. But they did tell us that places like Glasgow, where I am now, because it's near the coast, it'd be gone, and certainly gone by like 2020 time. I think they were telling us maybe the year 2010. So we've seen how they've made predictions before, they've lied in the past, but it feels to me now, right? And I'm not the first person to say this, and I'm certainly not the first person to observe it, but it feels like they're going full press to get this agenda over the line this time. Wouldn't you agree? And again, using the children, very effective means of propagandizing the masses, and not the first kind of group of people in the world to use the children. And I can think back to the bad guys in World War II who, probably were equally guilty of using children in a heinous way. Because I'm with you, it's wrong what Greta's been used for here. I might laugh, I might joke, but I always have to add in that she's one of the biggest victims of all.
Of course she is. It's very sad what they're doing with her. And, look, we all live on this planet. We all have a vested interest in keeping this planet from destroying itself. But the problem is the people that are selling you climate change are the same people that sold us weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, babies in the incubator. We need $700 billion in TARP bailout money, or else the economy will crash tomorrow. These are the same people, the mainstream media that told all of these stories, that rehash them, that made sure that they were out over and over again talking about these things. They're the ones. I'm sorry. It's just hard to take them seriously when it comes from such a dirty source, such as the United Nations, the mainstream media, the United States government, all of these groups have been caught lying over and over and over and over again. But this time, I'm sure they're telling the truth. And we have the data that proves that they're lying. We have documentation showing that they're lying. We understand what the scam is. And there's always a scam. There's always a scam. You don't think for a second that Al Gore actually gives a damn about the planet Earth, do you?
Maybe if he did, he would stop flying around planet Earth, getting fatter on his big fat aircraft. That how it still carries him is beyond me. And of course, Al Gore, the champion of polar bears in this world and the next, despite the fact their numbers are thriving. I wonder if he's now going to take up the cause for the penguins, because this is the latest propaganda we're getting in the UK now, and it'll be global, but I'm here, so I see it here. And it's the penguins are dying, Charlie, and it's all because of me and you. Not only have we got Greta Thunberg's childhood in a drawer somewhere, but we've also got the blood of penguins on our hands, man. We must change our ways.
I hate those penguins, man. I'm out there clubbing them every chance I get. Just getting rid of those things.
My other guest I've got that comes on here, Brian Keating. I think he might be quite happy with that. He had a few unfortunate incidents with a penguin down at the South Pole. Yep. There you go.
Well, that's another story.
But that's another episode altogether, my friend. You see?
Yeah, these guys. So, Al Gore puts out an inconvenient truth, and everyone says, "Oh my God, this is so moving. This is touching." I mean, he's talking about how these ice levels are shrinking and this and that. You know who Al Gore's good friend was back in the 90s, who was hanging out with him and teaching him about all these interesting carbon tax hustle scams? Ken Lay, CEO of Enron. The guy that was sentenced to 25 years in prison but died of a heart attack before he actually served any time. This was Al Gore's buddy. What was Enron doing? They were selling carbon offsets, and they were manipulating energy markets. They were doing a early version of cap and trade, and they got busted for rigging markets. And so Al Gore's hanging out with this guy, and then the next thing you know, he's pitching this carbon tax. And one of the things that we'll get into is sort of like, does the solution solve the problem? Does the solution of taxing people solve the problem? Well, maybe it would if the tax money that was being paid was then going to take care of this problem. But That is not actually how it's scheduled to happen. And I think that in order to really understand that this is not a new topic, this idea of climate change and global warming and all of these things that we hear about in our nightly news over and over again, they've been around for a long, long time. In fact, if you go back to 1971, an organization called the Club of Rome put out a document, a paper called Limits to Growth. And it was about the coming global warming issues that they were going to face. Now, to understand why this matters, you have to know who started the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome was formed by two people. Everybody's favorite lizard, David Rockefeller, was one of them. And the second guy was Dr. Alexander King. Now, that's a name that doesn't have much brand recognition, but he's a guy from the UK, co-founder of NATO, co-founder of the Committee of 300, and a high-ranking executive inside the Tavistock Institute. Now, the Tavistock Institute is the culture factory. They are the ones that create social trends. They're the ones that were behind the Beatles. They're behind everything that sort of comes out of nowhere and is all of a sudden everywhere, like climate change. So Dr. Alexander King and David Rockefeller got together to start this group called the Club of Rome, which by all accounts sounds like a pretty awesome gay bar. But it's not.
And I want people to remember that group as well, because that's going to be really relevant when I turn into Columbo later on in the show and I start connecting dots that definitely don't connect, okay? Club of Rome's in there.
So this is the stated goal of the Club of Rome, according to them. And what you will hear is a very, generic description that sounds vaguely like an organization that's out to do the right thing. This is how they describe themselves. To identify the most crucial problems, which will determine the future of humanity through integrated and forward-looking analysis, to evaluate alternative scenarios for the future and to assess risks, choices, and opportunities, to develop and propose practical solutions to the challenges identified, to communicate the new insights and knowledge derived from this analysis to decision makers in the public and private sectors, and also to the general public, and to stimulate public debate and effective action to improve the prospects for the future. Okay? Sounds good, right? I can get on board with that. That sounds like they're out to do a bunch of really great things. Here's the problem. In that document that I talked about, Limits to Growth, that came out in 1971, they also make a statement in there that is that's worth repeating and worth understanding. And I will read this. This is what they write. The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. We believe humanity requires a common motivation, namely a common adversary, in order to realize world government. World government. It does not matter if this common enemy is a real one or one invented for the purpose.
You see, this is what Ike would call the classic, he's infamous for problem, reaction, solution, but I think equally as effective a tool is the no problem, reaction, solution. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're getting into here, Charlie, when you invent this threat. And like you say, then you take it one step further, because you know that years of these crinkly old pervert politicians pushing this stuff, nobody's buying it anymore. And the science is far from settled. Yes, that's what it sounds like, because these are the only people that get to actually speak to you on the propaganda media. But the science isn't settled. So that somebody somewhere, probably the Tavistock or one of these other steering groups like that, have gone, the best way to market this is we go for the heartstrings. We go for the emotions. We use a child, but not only just any child, but one that has got this air of invincibility about her because she's got neurological issues. And that's not me criticizing her. Think how evil it is that these people would use her. It's craziness.
And they don't care. Of course, they'll march her out there as the poster child for this. They'll destroy her. She says things like, you've ruined my future, or you've ruined my life,
And
or whatever.
Charlie, there has been childhoods ruined over this, but it's not by the parents, it's by
No.
the schools and the people that are pushing the propaganda into them, to the point where these children literally are scared, Charlie, that the
Yeah.
planet isn't going to be here anymore. And I know it's
Yeah.
good to laugh and joke and look at the videos of them, screaming away and reacting absolutely insane. But at the same time, they're victims. And again, this is like crimes against children, the fact that they've been brainwashed and inducted into the death cult, because this is the same death cult that we can go back to September 2001, the same death cult, PNAC, launches wars. We were talking about this before the show. It's all connected, Charlie, and they're using kids because they know, like you said at the start, who's going to criticize that, right?
If you think like a psychopath and you want to make sure that your message gets out there and doesn't have much pushback, this is how you would do it. Who's going to criticize her? That it's not an exaggeration to say that she's being used as a human shield. It's reprehensible. And somebody's put her up to this. And then there's pictures of her wearing an Antifa t-shirt, right? And they're like, oh, well, where did you get that? And she says, oh, well, a friend gave it to me. And then there's pictures of her parents wearing Antifa t-shirts. And you're like, what's going on here? Who are her parents? Let's dig into this. Well, they both have acting backgrounds, as do her grandparents. Do they have ties to George Soros? Yes, they do. What a surprise. Here we go again with Soros. So this is not an organic sort of Arab Spring type thing. There's no such thing. There's no organic movements anymore. Well, maybe the Yellow Vest started off as one, and maybe it still is. I don't, to some extent, or the tractor revolution, in the Netherlands where they're protesting and things like that. But at some point, it gets co-opted. It gets taken over. You can have Occupy Wall Street, and then at some point, the off-duty police that are hired there to put on black masks and go in there and start trouble. You realize, hang on a second, this is, they're changing the narrative here. They're using subversive tactics. They're using rules for radicals. They're using Saul Alinsky's playbook. They're using all these things. So whenever you see something that's as coordinated as this, just ask yourself the question: how in the hell will a 16-year-old girl be invited to speak at the United Nations in front of all these people, to lecture all of these adults on how awful they are, if she was really a threat to the establishment? I would say that this wouldn't happen. If you and I wanted to go speak at the United Nations, good luck. It'll never happen. They're never going to invite us in there to come in and lecture these maniacs about what they're doing wrong.
It's like Edward Snowden.
Controlled opposition.
It's like Edward Snowden turning up there and then going behind the scenes after all the presentations are made, and he's high-fiving all these globalists and he's eating prawn vol-au-vents with them. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen this way. And it's the fact that it's so openly staged. Now, I don't know if it's because we've been looking at this stuff for so long, or whether they're so desperate that they're just pushing it, despite the fact that it's quite obviously an agenda, Charlie.
Yeah, it's an agenda, and it's like when you hear terms like the science is settled, that should be a huge red flag to anybody, because science is never settled. Somebody's always going to come in and challenge it, and we should always have this discussion. Once the discussion is once you are told that there's no longer allowed to be a discussion about this, then you've moved into dogma and not actual science. It's bordering on religion. And I would say that the climate change hysteria has turned into a form of religion for some people. And I think a lot of people want to do good, and they think they're doing the right thing. They don't understand that there's a much bigger game being played, and they're drawn into this, and they're pawns, and they don't even know it.
And talking about pawns, we'll be getting into some of them after the break when we talk about my least favourite group of activists in the UK, the Extinction Rebellion, or as they like to shorten it down, because most of the people that follow them can't actually spell out Extinction Rebellion. It's XR. Yes, we'll be getting into these useful idiots. Again, something that comes back from the old kind of the Marxist times, Leninist kind of times, that term used for people that can be used to great effect to make great change in the world. And what's even worse is they don't realize what change it is they're bringing about. I'm going to have a laugh with Charlie about this on the other side. And don't forget, Coming up later in the show, we have Kev Colombo. Or maybe I should go Ironside. Since I've got the family connection, right? You're going to love it. It's funny. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There we go, Mr. Charlie, and we're obviously still with these crazy animals on YouTube right now. So I'm just going to go and grab a quick can of Red Bull, and I'm going to leave them to eat you alive in the chat room, okay? So there you go. I'll even blow it up for you. Yeah, I'll even make it bigger so you can see what they're saying about you. They're all talking about your shiny head, man. I seen it earlier, yep. I'm only joking, man.
I'm sure they are.
You know, Jason was saying 12 years from now, they're going to look really stupid when this doesn't happen. And I was pointing out the fact that, you know, people have the attention span of a goldfish, literally. And you can look at that 17th letter of the alphabet. You can look at characters like David Wilcock and the mass arrests around the corner. Doesn't matter when predictions don't come true, because people just want that next hit of the hopium, and they'll keep on rolling on. So I honestly don't think it will matter if any of their bizarre claims that they're making about the planet comes to fruition or not, because these people, Charlie, that they'll just believe anything they're told, and one more crisis will take their attention right off it onto something else.
Yeah, this is social engineering. It's a form of, it's a well thought out, well-oiled machine that the Tavistock Institute has put into play. And if that name rings a bell for some people, especially in the UK, you remember the 7/7 bombing happened right in front of the Tavistock Institute. I would argue that it happened in the reason why it happened where it happened was so that they could have a front row seat from their offices there. They could look down on the 7/7 bombings. They could see the double-decker buses blown up. They could see they could see it all unfold, their handiwork unfold right in front of them. All the world is a stage. All of these false flags, they're coming from someplace. They're not just happening on their own. They're coming from somewhere. Who's doing it? Who's behind it? Tavistock Institute has been instrumental in shaping the narratives for decades. You have people that run these organizations that have a belief system that the ends justify the means. You know, even if you're talking about somebody who's if the goal is we want to get rid of guns because guns are bad and they kill people, you will find people that are willing to become crisis actors in these events, so that because even though it's a fake event, in their mind it doesn't matter, because if what I'm doing gets the guns off of the street, then the ends justify the means, right? In the end, it's all about getting the guns off. And if I have to lie about something, or if I have to fake an event, or if I have to be a part of some charade, I don't care, because the end result of there being fewer guns on the street is all that matters. And in this particular case, with regard to climate change, what they don't understand, what the people that are participating in this don't understand, is that this is all part of a gigantic thing that I've called the carbon tax hustle. And it is the scam of all scams.
Is that where we're going after the break?
That's where we're going. And I want to, and then I also want to sort of differentiate between pollution and carbon.
Yeah.
Climate change. There's a difference, and there this intentional masking of these two things. They go hand in hand. I think we'll get into it once you bring back the network. Once we come back, we'll talk about what people should really be upset about. There's plenty to be upset about. I would say that these people that look like they're at a Grateful Dead concert, twirling in the parking lot and everything.
Looks like the extras for The Walking Dead, man.
They do. Listen, I've been to enough Grateful Dead concerts.
Here we go,
I know
Charlie.
what the parking lot looks like.
Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, he, she, it, they, whatever pronouns you go by, you're all welcome in here today, because I have got Charlie Robinson in the virtual house with me. He is the author of The Octopus of Global Control, and that's 500 witnesses who give quotes that build a case for this century-long plan to form a new world order, a form of global governance that right now we're seeing being pushed hard. And of course, at the spearhead of all of this is a child that has been used not only by her parents, but by the very politicians that she claims to be going up against. And that is, of course, a Greta Thunberg. And we'll be having a bit of satire later in the show when I show you some of the origins of Greta, some of the least or less known facts about Greta Thunberg. And I struggle to keep a straight face when I say that. But Charlie, your website is the Octopus of Global Control.com. That is the Octopus of Global Control.com. Let people know where they can follow you on social media. And then we're going to get into something called, I'm getting my dancing shoes on here, man, the Carbon Shuffle. Yes.
Yes. You can find me on Twitter. I'm there. I'm on Facebook. You know, I'm on both of those places as long as they'll allow me to be on there.
You're like a repeat offender, man. You're doing some
Yeah.
serious time over on Facebook, dude.
I know. I'm that guy that keeps getting put in the hole, you know, in Facebook jail. But whatever. You can find me there. If you like the book and you want to buy a paperback version, you can find it at Amazon. You can also find it at barnesandnoble.com. If you like the digital version, just come to my website, donate $10 or more via PayPal or crypto, and I'll send you the two different digital versions of it. You can read it. You can pass it on to your friends. You can, you know, you can give it to people as a gift, whatever you want to do. I think the information in there is delivered in a way that is funny, even though the topics are kind of dark. It's the type of topics that we get into here, or you get into every single day. And I come in once a month, and I parachute in here to your show and just
now, don't get frightened a minute.
The earth, and then I leave.
Don't get frightened a minute, Charlie, because we're going to be joined by Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson, I think, is going to make a rude appearance on the screen here because we've got a new member over here on YouTube. Thank you very, very much. And of course, we're aiming for 100 members on YouTube. Want to thank everyone for supporting me over on TFR Live as well. That enables me to keep bringing on these amazingly intelligent guests. And I don't use that word lightly, but Charlie, with your experience added to your research, take us into this whole carbon con. What's really going on here, man?
I think first it's important to differentiate between two things. When everyone is talking about climate change and they're getting upset because we're treating the planet poorly and we're putting all this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and we don't have another planet to go to. What people are actually upset about is pollution. And that is a very different thing than climate change and carbon emissions. Pollution is obviously a very real thing. Corporations, countries, militaries dumping waste products into the rivers. 80% of waste in India goes straight into the Ganges. In Beijing, China, just the air quality of living in Beijing is the equivalent of smoking 21 cigarettes a day. These are very tangible, obvious signs that we're treating the planet poorly. The Pacific garbage patch that they say is the size of Texas or 4 times the size of Texas or however big it is. Look, these are real issues. We need to take care of them. We need to start treating this planet a lot better. Plastics and runoffs and pesticides that are going into the water, and they're turning the frogs gay and all this stuff. This surprisingly, it actually is a real thing. If you dig into it, the amount of chemicals and petrochemicals that are just either
Charlie,
runoff through
I've
rain.
Actually, if you look at the member emojis, I've got the gay frog, and that's the reason I use it, right? Because Alex Jones is just dressed up as it, and it's a good thing to laugh at, but it's a real thing.
It actually is a real thing, surprisingly.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he says a lot of crazy things, and some of them are true, and some of them are not true. But the fact that we have this pesticide industry that is spraying everything, and then that water the pesticides either run off through the water, they go down into the soil, or the animals eat the plants that have these pesticides. All of these things are real. Pollution, real. But global warming and climate change and this whole hysteria, they have hijacked all of the things about pollution that we're concerned about, that we should be concerned about, and they have stolen them for their little scam that they're running. Because what they're actually running is a carbon tax hustle. That's what I've called it.
I called it the shuffle, man. You see, I got it wrong.
It's the carbon tax hustle. And guys like Al Gore, like I said, were taught this by Ken Lay and the criminals at Enron, how to do this. It started years and years ago with cap and trade. And basically what this is, I'll just explain it as best I can. If you're a company in the future, if you're a company that produces widgets and you expel a certain amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as a result of your production facilities, what it takes for you to produce your widget, it puts out X amount of carbon into the atmosphere. They will set a schedule by which an allotment that you're given. Let's just say that you've got 100 tons. I'm just using this as a round number, and your company generates 120 tons every year, right? You've exceeded your threshold. You have to buy carbon tax offsets in order to cover that excessive amount of pollution that you've put into the atmosphere. If you're a company and you produce 80 tons of pollution, now you're below that threshold. So you actually have about 20 tons of leeway in between there. You can take your excess capacity that you have and you can sell that to some other company that needs it, that needs to buy it because of this whole thing. So what happens is that they will create a marketplace for carbon tax offset credits. It will be run by Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and all the big banks as usual. And what do they have a history of doing? They have a history, among other things, of rigging financial markets. Forex, COMEX, LIBOR, you name it. They've not only rigged it, they've been investigated for it, they've been found guilty of it, and they have paid out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in fines for rigging these markets. So what is going to happen? They're going to create a carbon tax marketplace.
Even more on from that, you look at Greta Thunberg, who we've been concentrating on tonight, and they say they found her organically, just one child protesting in the street. This dude just randomly walked past her, but that dude's interesting because turns out he didn't randomly walk past, and Greta had been selected to be this child face of this new green push. And when you look at this character, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but Red Ice Radio done a really great breakdown of this.
Yes.
And he is connected to the same very big banks that you're talking about, big industry, and they're the ones that are helping to push all of this climate propaganda and the climate change agenda. And you have to think to yourself, well, how are they going to benefit? Well, you're learning right here why and how they're pushing it, because they're going to benefit big time when we move to this carbon credit nightmare that they're pushing.
Right. So what is happening is they've created this agency called the IPCC. That's the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. And what this group is going to do is they're going to oversee the carbon tax system that's in place. They're going to be the judge, jury, and executioner of anything carbon tax related. So if you're a country or a company and you're exceeding your allotment of carbon output, then you're going to have to deal with them. You're going to have to buy carbon offsets from them. This will then come through that marketplace that will be managed by all these banks, where you can make some money if you've got excess capacity in your production facilities and you've got more carbon allowances than you actually need. You will then sell that into the marketplace, and then you'll put it in the marketplace and somebody will buy it from you. It's like it's like trading stocks or bonds or futures contracts and things like this. It's going to be a massive think of it like this. If you go into a casino, you've got craps, baccarat, roulette, blackjack. This is just a new game that they've invented that's coming into this casino. It's going to be rigged. They're going to make trillions of dollars from it. And who's going to pay for it? We are. Because if you're this company that has exceeded the carbon output and you're forced to buy carbon offsets from this marketplace, that's going to cost you money. They're going to in turn pass that cost down to their customers. So whatever it is you're buying, whatever widgets you're buying from them, you'll pay more because of this taxation scam. And when has anything ever gotten better because of taxation? It doesn't. It's not meant to. So if you think about this this is a genius idea, because the IPCC has created this carbon tax system literally out of thin air, because it doesn't exist. It's not a physical thing. It's just an allowance, and they're just saying this is the threshold, and if you exceed this, you owe more in taxes. And so it's the ultimate scam, right? It's nothing. They're selling offsets of nothing. And if the so what will really make people mad about this whole thing is that I could sort of understand it if the IPCC said, we're taking all of this carbon tax money that's coming in, and we're then using it to fight against pollution and climate change and all that. But that's not what's going to happen. They're keeping this money. They're fining you. They're fining countries, companies, and individuals for excessive carbon pollution. That money goes to the IPCC, and then they keep it. That's the scam.
I'm going to be ruined, dude. I'm going to be ruined. I'm like a set of bagpipes. I fart about 50 times a day. I'm worse than a big Highland cow. I truly am. So I really am. I'm going to be like out of pocket, huge time here, dude.
And eventually what they'll do on an individual basis is they'll find a way to tax your carbon output individually. And if you don't pay your carbon tax, well, guess what? It'll eventually, by this time, it'll be tied into your social credit system. Don't pay your carbon tax, don't get on an airplane. That's coming. All of this is tied to, if you notice the time frame they keep throwing out, 2030. Where have I heard that before? Agenda 21, which transformed into Agenda 2030. And who is behind Agenda 2030? The United Nations. Who allowed Greta Thunberg to speak? The United Nations. Who is behind the IPCC? The United Nations. Who also has developed what is called the United Nations Green Climate Fund. And what that is, that's a fund that's been paid for by $100 billion from the United States that has gone into this fund, and that is basically used as a slush fund to convince all of the countries around the world to join the Paris Climate Accord. The reason why Trump pulled out of that is because either he recognized it or somebody in his administration recognized that it was a gigantic scam, and he pulled out. What the Paris Climate Accord is it is about getting all of these countries to sign on to this carbon tax system. And what they've done for countries like China, and China is a massive polluter, right? Don't see Greta Thunberg go protesting in China. go try that. We'll see.
Good luck with that, Greta.
One of those camps with the Uyghurs, right, in northwest China, right, with a blindfold on you, handcuffed behind your back, and that'll be the last time we ever see her. The IPCC has told China, we want you on board with this. You pollute, 11 billion tons of carbon this year. We'll set the allotment at 22 billion for you by 2030, which is, obviously it doesn't have anything to do with saving the environment, because if they were serious about saving the environment, they wouldn't make an allowance for China to allow them to literally double their current carbon output. It's not about that. It's about getting them involved. It's about getting every single country to sign into this thing, lock them in to this through the United Nations Green Climate Fund. That $100 billion is set to pay off people, influencers, and that are tied to these countries, to get them to sign on and be a part of this. And once they're a part of it, then the carbon tax scam starts. And the reason why this is important for people to understand is because the carbon tax hustle is going to be the funding mechanism of the New World Order from 2030 on. This is where they are going to draw their trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of tax revenue that will flow through this corrupt organization that the United Nations controls. And it will be overseen by the IPCC, which is just a bunch of bureaucrats with advisors like Al Gore. And they're all going to make a fortune under the guise of saving the planet. But you're not saving the planet. You're just paying a tax. That's all you're doing. You can pat yourself on the back. you can say, God, I feel really good about I'm doing my part. I'm helping to save the world. If you want to save the world, go plant trees, go pick up trash. If you want to do that, paying taxes isn't going to save anything. When have you ever paid your taxes and had your situation get better in your wherever you live, whatever country you live? It doesn't happen. Inevitably, that tax money gets taken. It gets commingled with other funds. It gets spent on stupid stuff like wars. It gets spent on, $500,000 to study the sex life of pigeons to find out if cocaine makes.
Come on, be fair.
Makes pigeons gay.
Be fair.
I mean, crazy things like this.
Be fair, Charlie. Be fair. That's troubled me some nights. I've not been able to get to sleep because of the pigeon homosexuality conundrum that we're in right now. But think about this as well. How crazy does this get? Because are we looking at like 5-10 years down the line, the next country that doesn't play ball with this same set of globalists, are we going to go in there and regime change them for not being green enough?
Absolutely.
Are we going to green? Yep, we're going to green bomb people, Charlie. I see this coming.
Yeah, this is like when the United States says that they're going to launch a humanitarian effort in Syria, and that involves them bombing Syria so that they don't get killed by the other side. I mean, it's just madness. It's insanity. They're going to first of all, the United States military is one of the biggest polluters in the world. Where's the protest against that, Greta? If we're being intellectually honest, why aren't you protesting them? Why aren't you protesting all of the carbon emissions that come out of cruise ships that just sit around and take people on 4-day trips? They exceed as much carbon as 1 million cars. Where's that? It's nonsense. Okay, this is all. It's all theater. It's theater designed to make us feel guilty and to make us actually. I mean, at its core, it's a genius plan because it gets you thinking that we've got to help the environment, we've got to save the world, we've got to stop, spewing carbon into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide into the atmosphere because it's killing everybody. Meanwhile, plants need it to, live. And we need plants for oxygen and all of these things. Nobody really kind of digs too far below the surface. And this goes back to what I was talking about when I said that she is appealing to people on an emotional level, telling them there's no time. There's no time to think. Time's up. Time's over. We can't waste another minute about it. We have to do something about this now. I want you to do something now. And that is an appeal to emotion rather than to facts, research, and digging into this. Once you dig into who's behind all these things, you start to see these David Rockefellers and Alexander Kings and
the
Al Gore's.
Science isn't settled. The science is far from settled,
Not only is it not settled, but let me bring up something here really fast. They did a study, the University of East Anglia's Climate Research Unit. What they did was they took a deep dive into this, and what they found was that the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was basically taking their statistics from one guy, and this guy had a couple of charts that they were using. This is Professor Philip Jones, and he was in charge of 2 key sets of data that the IPCC used to draw up their reports. The first one was his global temperature record was the most important of the 4 sets. And it relied on Michael Mann's hockey stick graph. And what that is that showed like 1,000 years of carbon, and it showed like this spike that went straight up. So it was talking about global temperatures and things like that had shot up. The graph became sort of like the central focal point of this entire IPCC's climate change thing. The problem is Michael Mann's climate change hockey stick chart was a fraud, and he knew it. And Michael Mann started taking heat from these guys, from these other scientists that came out. A guy named Dr. Tim Ball came out and said that his numbers were garbage and the whole thing was faked. And so Michael Mann of the hockey stick chart sued Tim Ball for libel and lost. Not only did he lose, but the court said, you have to pay Dr. Tim Ball's legal fees, which were multi-millions of dollars, because he wasn't libeling Michael Mann's stick. He proved that it was all baloney. And that's not just, that was the court saying this. So when you dig into who this guy Dr. Jones is, this Dr. Jones who's using Michael Mann's hockey stick thing, what you find out is that he has refused to release the basic data for which his temperature record is derived. He just says, I'm not going to release it. And then when people kept pushing him on it, what he finally said is, well, the data it got lost.
And Charlie, this is the same University of East Anglia that was caught up in something called ClimateGate, where they were caught with emails, hackers hacked in.
This is it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They hacked in and they were saying, well, we'll just leave those set of numbers out, obviously, because they didn't go along with the narrative that they were basically being paid to push.
They got busted. Their emails were leaked, and what it showed was, like you said, they were advised to delete large chunks of data in order to make the charts work. They were also, in those emails, they were discussing how to get around Freedom of Information Act requests by deleting information, which is a crime, by the way. And then they were complaining about how hard it was to make the computer simulation models actually give them the results that they wanted. Not that they were complaining about the computer simulations not working. They were complaining that they weren't giving them the results that they wanted. I mean, how unscientific is that?
Dude, that's like confirmation bias disorder. It's taking it to a whole new level.
And the last thing that these emails exposed was that it was showing that how they would go about silencing anyone that was challenging their findings, and how they were using peer review academic research. They were all in one little group, and they were reviewing each other's work, but they were all on the same team. So it was like, I will review your work, you review that guy's work, and he'll review my work, and they were all in it together. So when these emails came out, and this was 10 years, it was 2009 when
Dude,
it came out.
I remember having a YouTube channel at the time. I lost a YouTube channel over this very topic. So yeah. I've been at this too long, man. Way, way, way too long, dude. I'm telling you.
So when people say that the science is settled, it's important to understand that the science is not settled. That in fact the core root of where the science is being pulled from is totally compromised, and it's proven. It's proven that it's compromised. You look at their charts, and what they do is something that's real obvious, right? They take a chart that shows 60 years, and if it's going down where they want it to go up, they just clip it. And they just mark it from, instead of going back 60 years, they want to go back 40 years. And so it looks like it's going up. So they can manipulate this data. It happens all the time. It's not limited to
Charlie,
climate change, people.
I've even gone over how, like, over the 19th century, all throughout it, there was this whole thing. They started talking about climate being a problem. But the majority of the stories back in the day, 50s, 60s, 70s, it wasn't talking about warming. It was talking about the fact we were heading towards a Maunder minimum. And it was going to be death by ice at one stage. And this, for me, just shows that, listen, folks, climate always changes. They know that. And they're trying to ride it like a pony right over the finish line to get everything in their agenda pushed through. It's just a vehicle for them, Charlie. It truly is. And at a time when it is, I mean, over here in the UK, yeah, the summers have got hotter. But that's just the weather. It's just the climate changing. It's not anything that we've done in the last 10 or 20 years that's stolen the childhood of Greta Thunberg and all these other people out there. This is the death cult. And when they're trying to get CO2 levels down to zero, then if you have any basic knowledge of science, there's a big problem there, and it's called humans. And I just wonder how long before some of them start offering themselves at the altar to climate change. This is the same week that we've had people talking about literally eating babies in the name of saving the planet. You couldn't make this up, Charlie. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just as recently as the early 1970s, Time magazine had covered talking about global cooling. And then there was global warming. But you notice global warming has gone away as a title. Why is that? Because sometimes the temperature goes up, sometimes it goes down. And when you change it to climate change, that's just something Orwell would be so proud of, because that allows you to cover yourself on both ends, right? Whether it goes up or goes down, it's climate change. Well, it's always changing. It's such double speak.
It's
that
it's like getting like
ridiculous.
fearful about time marching forward. The direction of time, the direction of time. We need to fight the direction of time. Yeah, cheers for that.
Good luck. Good luck. Yeah, I mean, there's some things that we need to fight about. Like I said, I think that pollution is a real thing that we should really be worried about. But this isn't it.
We're going to be back after these short messages. Don't go anywhere, folks. There we go. I've got to remember I'm multitasking. We've got people in the chat room. Sun is rock bottom and solar minimum. It's a lot more than just us. Yeah, and even, but then the sun as well. Everything in the universe is cyclical. The sun, everything goes in these cycles, and it's how they interact and how they influence one another that gives us this planet that always changes from the climate to everything, Charlie. It's a planet of great change. In fact, everything must move forward and change in some way, shape, or form, or else things stop. And when things stop, nothing happens. It'd be boring if it was the same all the time, right?
And leave it to George Carlin to nail it 20 years ago in some of his work where he's talking about the climate. He was out in front of this. He's talking about how arrogant we are to think that we're going to come in and save the world. Now, I think that we have a responsibility to not destroy, not to do our part to destroy the world, of course. But the fact that we're going to come in and save the world obviously is just our arrogance at work. And in my book, I put Carlin in there as much as I could because he wasn't just a comedian.
But me and you,
sort of like a history.
Me and you appreciate what the true job of a comedian is. It's to point out the obvious as opposed to construct, fantastical stories, because they're able to make fun of real things that we can all relate to, that we can all see. And Carlin, he was a master at it, dude.
He was great with his words. He painted a picture like none other. And he understood the hypocrisy of politicians. They're gonna tell you, they're gonna stand up and say you need to save the whales and save the bees. Let's save the bees. We got to save the bees. Meanwhile, they're allowing Monsanto to spray, every sort of chemical that they can and decimate the bee population. But we've got to save the bees. I mean, if that
they're that busy saving the bees, they're creating swarms of drone bees to take over.
Great.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, yeah, that's not going to end badly or anything.
It's see when you project forward to what it's going to look like in 50 years if they get their way. It's worse than any sci-fi movie we've ever seen, Charlie. It'd be like,
but the world's going to end in 12 years, Kev.
Of course. Sorry, I've not been drinking enough Greta Aid this week, so I'm really not up to speed with all the latest kind of time frames. Are we not down to like a year now, just to really put the shits up people?
We've been down to a year for a long time. This started with, like I said, with Paul Ehrlich in his book. He's talking about it in the 77.
Telling you folks, this is like mass arrests to like the clickbaiters on YouTube and things. I mean, the globalists, they use this kind of climate change, 12 years, this kind of going off the cliff scenario. This is their clickbait, but this is how they get people's attention, right? And when it fails to come to fruition, they just roll out another date and people continue being useful idiots like we're going to get into after the break. The Extinction Rebellion, yes.
There's a bunch of them. And I would encourage people, if they're interested in seeing a visual representation of the carbon tax hustle, to find Dr. Shiva Arundari, his video, the guy from MIT. He did a whiteboard presentation about 13 minutes long where he explains this in a way that's much better than I could do it, because he's a super bright guy, and he just draws it out in a way that really sort of explains. And it's not very, like most good hustles, it's simple. At its core, it's really not that difficult. It's like fractional reserve banking of the new millennium.
Here we go. Hour number 2 is upon us on today's Kev Baker Show. with my special guest, Charlie Robinson. Please, folks, check out his website, the Octopus of Global Control.com. And he also has a book by that very same name, The Octopus of Global Control. Now, we've been talking about my good friend Greta and her trip to Glasgow. Oh, goodness me. We've also been talking a lot about this carbon hustle, something that's definitely at the very centre of a lot of this. And to get this whole carbon hustle going and to push through the agendas under the guise of climate change, like we're seeing right now, then you need your band of useful idiots. You need the protest to spring up organically, of course, around the world. And you need these people to provide all of the video footage necessary for the mainstream media to really go full throttle on the mind control, the programming of the people, to convince you that not only is this a problem, but it's a real and present danger. And look, these people, they're out there, they're fighting for the planet on your behalf. I hope you appreciate this. And one group in the UK, Charlie, that's been at the forefront of all of this, and I haven't held back on them at all. I've never seen anything quite as staged in all my life as the fake blood that was sprayed on one of the government buildings down in the most secure, surveilled and locked down cities in the whole world, London. And they just happened to drive a truck randomly in a climate of time where you know, trucks have been used for bad things in the UK and in Europe in recent years. But these geniuses managed to get through the cordons. They pulled up right in front of a government building, could have been anyone. And then they started spraying this unknown substance onto the front of the government building. Well, imagine my surprise that they were able to get there in the first place, but then to seal the deal, you had the world's media sitting waiting to take pictures of Extinction Rebellion. The useful idiots that are bringing London to a standstill. The useful idiots that probably think they are saving the planet. But how gluing yourself to a road, a ring road around London does that? It's beyond me. If you want to go and glue yourself to a runway somewhere, have at it. Go for it. As long as it's not me going on my package holiday at the time, I don't mind. But what the hell's going on here, Charlie? These people are absolutely off their heads.
This is called controlled opposition. And the people that are a part of this, the guys that look like they're at a Grateful Dead concert, do not understand how they fit into this whole thing. They probably honestly think that they're helping. They don't realize that this is all theater. And they are just members of the cast involved in this big operation that of gluing themselves to flagpoles or getting on top of airliners and protesting against that. You know, it reminds me of the anthrax attacks, you know, which was so fake and so obviously staged and so, you know, had allowed to happen, like those pipe bombs that were allegedly mailed to CNN and all these different places. And you're like, but they didn't go through the post office. There was no return stamp and, you know, it wasn't stamped or anything. How could you have done this? Well, we don't know. They just showed up. This step where you're allowing fire trucks filled with red liquid to go spray all over the building. This is allowed to happen. This is that is the explanation for this. How did this happen? How did these? Oh, they're so great. They've got a camera crew set up. They've got this whole thing staged where this fire truck is filled with red liquid and we're going to spray. It's like blood. We're going to spray it all over the place. If they didn't know who those people were and that they were coming to do that, they would have been hit by a Tomahawk cruise missile.
And I think they've done this on a Friday, right? I think they've done this on a Friday. So compare this to, say, some young guy coming out of the mosque and he thinks to himself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a bit of a laugh here. My friend's got an old fire truck. I'm going to jump in the fire truck. I'm going to drive into the centre of London. I'm going to start spraying this stuff on the building. You know that guy would have got out the truck and been shot in the head twice. He'd have been double tapped in the head, Charlie. An unknown substance, a truck, and a Muslim? For goodness sake. Folks, this is so staged, it makes like I said, my eyes want to bleed at times looking at some of the news, Charlie.
Yeah, so you have to dig into who is behind the Extinction Rebellion. Like, is this an organic group? Is this a real batch of people? Or is this maybe some people that have ties to, you know, some nefarious people. So first of all, what they are demanding is that governments declare a climate emergency and reduce carbon dioxide emissions to 0 within 6 years. Okay, I'm sure we're all going to get right on that. Okay, they've interviewed these people and they've said, so that would call for the grounding of all airplanes and all cars. And they're like, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want.
And I mean, to spell this out, this is suicide for a nation. It's bad enough that we're going to have to do this over time, but if you put this horrendous time scale on it, that it collapses a country. And this is the thing, because XR, they might on the face of it look like these kind of new age tree huggers, but there's a lot more going on there, Charlie, isn't there?
There is. So who's behind this group? Two people, Roger Hallam and Dr. Gail Broadbrook. Okay. Dr. Gail Broadbrook has been a protester for like a professional protester, it seems like, for 20 years. And she has admitted that her role is, quote, mostly about securing your own paycheck. So she is paid to protest. She is involved in this.
She's like a soccer star, dude. You know, you have your American football. She's drafted in for whatever the kind of the plight of the time is. She sells out to the highest bidder, you know?
Yeah. And look, so what do you do in a case like this when you're investigating an organization? You look for the money. Where's the money coming from? Well, they received $500,000 from Eileen Getty of Getty Oil. Interesting. An oil company financing climate extinction rebellion, climate change. They also received $1 million from Children's Investment Fund Foundation, which sounds like an organization that's out to help children, until you realize that it was founded by a hedge fund manager and run by a former vice chairman of George Soros's Open Foundation. So here we go again with George Soros having ties back to these people. If George Soros is involved in anything, it's not for the benefit of humanity. I think that should be obvious by now. This guy's only been doing it for 40 years. You know, he's involved in everything that has to do with destabilizing nations. He's backed all the color revolutions: Rose Revolution in Georgia, Orange Revolution in Ukraine, Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan. He's been behind the Bulldozer Revolution in Serbia, and also, for all of us in the United States, surprise, surprise, he was behind Black Lives Matter. That was not an organic group. That was funded by George Soros. What he does is he divides societies into two pieces and then puts them against one another. Actually, if it's possible, he'll continue to divide them, because what the people in positions of power, and I wrote about this extensively in my book, what they do not want is a unified population. They do not want that. That is the one thing that can take them down. If all of us wake up to this nonsense and we go, you know what, the enemy isn't Republicans or Democrats or Tories or Labor or whatever. The real enemy is everyone in government. All of you maniacs, you're the problem. You're the ones that are causing it. We need to get you out. Once we decide and put our heads together and we come together as one group and do that, we could change this world overnight.
And Charlie,
they don't want that.
It goes deeper than that as well, because we'll go to Ike. We love David Icke, the two of us, and I think we could do a lot worse than looking to him for ideas. But I think he explains it best, because you look at Trump, you look at Boris Johnson, you look at any of the politicians that we know, and he calls them here today, gone tomorrow. So it's one thing, you know, thinking you're exercising your democratic right every 4 or 5 years and voting the bad ones out and the new ones come in. But you have to appreciate this other level, the more powerful level of the people you don't see, the permanent government, the ones that give the talking points to the Trumps, the Johnsons, the people that take the offices over here. And he was talking about somebody who's the health minister now in the UK, and they're on about mandatory vaccines, Charlie. And he points out the fact that this guy in his past, he's a trained economist. And he came from the office of head of the Department of Digital Industry and Social Media, some absolute obscure new department that he was head of. And again, he comes from there into health. And do people think that he really is a wizard on all things health, and he was a wizard on all things social media? No. It's the people behind him that tell him what the agenda is, and they'll still be there. Whether it's Labour, whether it's Tory, your side of the pond, Republicans, Democrats, they're the ones that we need a a system change, Charlie.
For sure. And some of the people, the organizations that are behind this Extinction Rebellion is a group called Blended Finance Task Force. And you wonder who that is, and you dig in to see who's involved on a deeper level in this Extinction Rebellion. And what you find out is that Blended Finance Task Force is made up of, the World Bank, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, and HSBC. The four of the biggest criminal banking institutions on the planet. And so when you've got banks involved, when you've got George Soros involved, then what you have is not an organic uprising. It's not a real revolution. It's not a real thing. It's controlled opposition. That's exactly what this is. This is people pretending to fight the power out in the street. People that really honestly think that they're fighting the power out in the street. They have no idea that who is actually behind this. They don't know that the banks are involved. If they knew that the banks were involved, would they wake up to this? Probably not. But I'm telling you that the World Bank is financing this. And George Soros is kicking in money. He's literally put in $1 million the guys that are tied to George Soros have put in $1 million to this. So, I mean, he's getting pretty good at covering his tracks, but on some aspects, he doesn't even really care to some extent. He does CBS 60-minute interviews where he talks about society, and he says, I don't care about society. My job is to make money. And but he does care about society. He's lying about that. He does want to make money, but he also has an interest in socially engineering this world in a way that fits with his worldview. And I would say that George Soros and Henry Kissinger have a lot in common, right? They're just old Jewish guys that hide their true nature, where they came from and who they are, and they pretend to be out looking for the best interest of the world, while simultaneously, in Kissinger's case, dropping more bombs on Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia than were dropped in all of World War II combined ×2. So these guys, and George Soros, if George Soros had a job in the military, he'd be the guy, he wouldn't be pouring money into finance these revolutions. He'd be pouring missiles and bombs into
Charlie,
to revolutionize.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that sweet, loving old men like this, why is it so hard for you to think that they want to save the planet, dude? You're so cynical.
Yeah, I know.
Damn,
I don't know. I would just call it experience.
But something else that's lost in amongst all these protests is the fact that London's one of the biggest metropolitan cities in the world. And the people of London, the actual residents, they're pissed, Charlie, because their lives are being totally disrupted by this shower of travelling clowns. There's no other way to put it. And I think Paul Joseph Watson, he deserves a lot of credit for a video that he made about these useful idiots. And again, they probably think they're doing the right thing, but there's a lot of them there just to be there, to get the Instagram shot, to get the selfie so they can be these almost virtue signaling protesters, or protest signaling. I don't know what you call it, Charlie. It's weird.
They think they're helping. They are going to be disruptive. That's all they can do, right? They're not going to put their heads together and actually, form some sort of institution that's going to really tackle climate change. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to take acid, go out into the middle of the town square with all their buddies, and start doing, interpretive dance maneuvers and walking around in circles, chanting and it looks like theater nerds. It looks like all of the people in high school that were in theater that you goofed on, that were total, thespians out running around. But Charlie, look, this genius here was honestly going to go and save the rainforests right before the police arrested him. I know, honestly, he was. He promised he was going to go and save all the rainforests, man. That dude would get eaten by a bug in the rainforest so fast with that green hair. I guarantee you there would be nothing to say. He would get a blow dart from some tribe that has yet to be discovered, and he would be, tied up above a roaring fire as they cook him.
This is the level of propaganda and brainwashing that's going on. And I mean, I'm not I don't have an eye for symbols, but I'm sure somebody that's deep into like the occult, like Ryan Gable, he'll probably look at that and say, ah, well, that's actually a sigil for this demon that they're walking down the street with. And that's not me knocking Ryan, but these people don't know what they're being used for, folks. Truly, they don't have a clue what they're being used for. And it's sad. It is sad. I mean, look at this is the one I was looking for. Look at these people. It's like middle-aged men dressed up as like mimes, and it's just craziness. And talk about a death cult. They're obsessed with the color red, and they're spraying buildings with fake blood. And there's something highly creepy and sinister going on here, dude.
Those guys look like they were part of the opening ceremonies of CERN.
Either that, or they got lost on their way to like be extras in the party at Eyes Wide Shut. They look like the guys that should have been handing out glasses of champagne on your way into the orgy, you know?
For sure. That, or they're, going to play Dungeons and Dragons with their friends somewhere. If these people are going to be in charge of the revolution is going to last about 10 seconds. These guys are not in charge. They're not facilitating any real change. It's like, they remind me of Antifa, right? All Antifa guys are out there and they're all black and everything with their note from their mom in their back pocket. If arrested, please call mom. And, this is just, the best description I can come up with is just theater. It is theater of the absurd. It is nothing more than a bunch of people role playing, pretending to save the world, gluing themselves to things, handcuffing themselves. Did you see the video of the guys that handcuffed themselves to this like meat packing facility, and then somebody turned the machines on?
Dude.
And this dude was like handcuffed to it, and he was like, "Get me out of here!" Like the machine is going down the conveyor belt, and you just had visions of this guy getting turned into hamburger meat in like 2 minutes.
I can watch no more of it. It's just, it almost triggers me. I'm finding myself, Charlie, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm finding myself more easily triggered these days. And I think it's just a reaction. It's almost an instinctual reaction to the idiocy that is around me. There's no other way to explain it, dude. I should be getting more serious in my kind of presentations. I should be to the point of almost sounding like I'm issuing dire warnings when I look at the world around me. But I can't. I just have to laugh. Because
I just laugh at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so absurd that
and again, these people only make up what, not even 1% of the population. They certainly don't represent me when they're getting up to all these antics. And yet, to look at the media, again, it's the perfect example of how these people, they get the airtime, and it looks like there's this massive global movement. But in the end of the day, it's a bunch of loon balls.
Yeah. And, but also we dig in like a little bit more to this Extinction Rebellion. And when you look at, like I mentioned, there are a couple people that were involved in it. This Gail Bradbrook, she is also involved in a group called Citizens Online. She is the program. She's in charge of program development for Citizens Online. And you look at who this organization is, and what you find is that on their board of directors, you've got the former head of ExxonMobil.
Oh, nice.
Right? Yeah. And you've got a guy named Lord Anthony Tudor St. John.
Whoa, indeed, sir. Lord Anthony Tudor.
Yeah.
Dang,
He's,
dude.
yeah, well, he is very much involved in the rollout of 5G.
Huh? Go
so
figure.
what are we doing here? This group also, Citizens Online, also
you'd think your rabid environmentalists would be very, very opposed to the rollout of 5G with everything that's out there, right?
You would think that they would be opposed to 5G, except that there's a guy that's pushing 5G involved in Citizens Online. You would think they would be against ExxonMobil because, they're just only the biggest oil company in the world. And you would also think that they would be against somebody that has ties to this group as well, and that is the Saudi royal family. I mean, what you guys don't have someone from the Mossad involved in this too? And the CIA? I mean, so who are the people running this? And who are they? Who's the money behind them? You've got Soros, you've got ExxonMobil involved, you've got the rollout of 5G with some lord. God knows how you get the lord title. We all know there's some nonsense going on there. And you've got the Saudi royal family involved. I mean, this is nonsense. This is all This is all nonsense. These activists and everything, they don't even know what they're protesting against. They haven't dug into it to find out what's really going on. And God forbid you challenge them on this, then they'll throw red paint on you, or they'll say we gotta kill him. We gotta kill him. He's against the environment. I'm not against the environment. I live on the same planet as the rest of you maniacs. I want clean air and clean water, and I want all these things too.
Charlie,
but I'm not going to get taxed to pay for it because it doesn't solve the problem.
Even if we were wrong, and we're not wrong because we're not making any great claims about what's happening. We're just saying that these people, the science they're pushing, it's not decided. The whole climate change thing, it certainly isn't settled. Yet in recent times, right, we've seen how the anti-vaccination movement have basically lost their ability to even speak about things by being deplatformed. And I imagine it's going to start happening soon, if it hasn't already. But even merely questioning Greta or any of the children or anything that comes from this climate change propaganda, merely questioning it is going to get people kicked off of social media.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't we think that would happen? That's the next logical step, because it's already, here with polarizing topics like you mentioned, like vaccines, or if you want to talk about a certain school in Connecticut, that'll get you thrown off, or if you want to, if you're critical of the royal family, they come after. I mean, everything is they're shrinking the acceptable playing field of topics that you can discuss, right? They're just making certain things are just completely off limits. And when you challenge something like vaccines, they're quick to slap a label on you. That's another way you can tell that you're dealing with a group that doesn't want you to dig into the facts about things, because what they'll do is they'll try to just instantly discredit you. Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. How dare you be an anti-vaxxer? Well, didn't you watch your news? It's all about how all those anti-vaxxers are crazy and that vaccines could cause autism. That's been disproven. The science is settled. Just like climate change, right? Here we go again with the science being settled. Remember Hillary Clinton saying the science is settled, vaccines work, right? Good. I trust Hillary Clinton about as little as you could possibly trust a person. She's going to sell this turd to everybody. She's going to say the science is settled. When you hear that the science is settled, it's no longer science. It's religion. It's become religion.
Dude, come on now. To be fair,
at the stake
fair,
now if they could.
Well, that's quite a good kind of pun, burning people at the stake, talking about the Clintons and broomstick one and things like that. But I was quite surprised last night. I was actually making a case for Hillary Clinton being a good-looking woman, only because we were comparing her to Chelsea. So give me some leeway, man. Give me some leeway. But we've got Joe Joseph in the chat room. Dang, dude. But that's like, having like Joe, the man from the flood in the chat room, that's kind of biblical occurrence, dude. It truly is. But when we come back after the break, if Charlie will afford me the time, I'm going to roll out the crime scene investigation. Yes, SCU goes into effect. We will have speculation creation unit. We're going to have a little laugh about the origins of Greta Thunberg after the break. I think it's funny. Charlie thinks it's funny. Even if he doesn't, I'm going to say he thinks it's funny. And we'll definitely get into that. And where else can we go, Charlie? We're certainly putting targets on our back tonight, going up against this mob. Where next? Never a uncontroversial show with you. That's why you're the most algorithm unfriendly guest that comes on KBS. It hates you, dude.
I
think maybe it's been trained on a data set that had something against bald people. So maybe the algorithm just gets triggered at
Well, I did Sean Atwood's show, and he's about as bald as I am.
And may I just say, bravo, brilliant work, you and Sean. And Sean, he's really knocking it out the park these days, man. He truly is.
I love his work. I mean, you know that. You and I have chatted about that. He's doing great stuff. But I also love prison documentaries. So his true crime series where he's talking to these ex-prisoners is fascinating to me. I have watched one of them for
now Charlie, we're gonna have me barging in on screen doing this stupid dance that I do when super chats come up. I know you'll probably find it hilarious. I do it myself, but hey,
you're doing the carbon tax hustle.
It is. It's like if you could, in fact, I might get Al Gore. I might make a gif of Al Gore dancing it in. That might be quite topical. Hopefully that's going to come up on... There he goes. Joe Joseph, you pesky animal.
Get your arc ready, Charlie. Man Bear Pig is coming.
Joe, can we make a case for just like taking on lots more than 2x2 polar bears and penguins? Because you know the polar bears and penguins are struggling, right? We're going to be back after the break, folks. Remember to check out the Octopus of Global Control.com. That's the Octopus of Global Control.com. This is the kind of book that is filled with all the ammunition you need to arm you with the facts that may just open up the eyes of friends and family around you. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, there you go. You see, you get all sorts hanging out in the chat room here. All sorts of waifs and strays. Imagine Joe Joseph hanging out.
Sketchy characters like Joe Joseph.
So when we come back, right, I'm going to unveil the crime board, Charlie. Oh, you're going to like this. This is good stuff, yes.
I can't wait.
It's a laugh, folks. It's a laugh, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the 17th letter of the alphabet pushers out there go, you know, he might be having a bit of a laugh with that, but look at the comparison. Oh, there's something in this. And they might just run with it. So when you hear this being pushed by the Q pushers and things, always know where it originated first, okay? Right here on KBS. So yeah, after that, Charlie, where do you want to go, man? Who's still on your list for ripping apart?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm concerned about these Pacific Gas and Electric in California shutting off the power to people.
Yeah,
That's
Let's talk about that, because I was speaking. I must admit, Charlie, I had no idea. I'd seen a couple of California-related stories going through the news feed, but I hadn't really paid attention. And then Nano Girl reached out and she says, Kev, there's something going on here. Took a little look at it, and it was weird. Oh, indeed.
I'm starting to feel like Winston Smithing sock.
Sock, brilliant. I'm telling you, dude, that's where we're at. That is exactly where we're at. Now, I can't even remember what I was saying, Charlie.
You were talking to Nano Girl.
Yeah, and that's what she was telling me, like, start to look into it. And when I was going to you know how I love YouTube, not critical of YouTube, but it was one of these news stories where you were only getting the mainstream results back. And even when I added in, like, Ilana Freeland's name, nope, still just the mainstream sources coming back. And I'm thinking, oh, well, this raises a red flag for me. So yeah, I got my eyes opened yesterday, dude. That's really weird what's going on there.
Yeah, it is. It is weird. You know, they were involved in the California wildfires from last year. They were
Rothschilds.
Well, they're one of the Rothschilds mergers and acquisition members was sitting on the board of PG&E, but he's off as of, I think, January or February of this year after they filed for bankruptcy. So this is a gas and power company that had that was involved in Enron. If you remember that, when they were doing rolling brownouts. I lived in California. I grew up in California. I mean, I lived there I'm 47 now, and I've lived in California probably 35 years or so. So I'm very familiar with it. What they're doing, I mean, they've taken this state, not PG&E necessarily specifically, but the state has changed so much. It's turned into, you see what's happening in San Francisco.
Man. It's like it's falling apart. You know, it's like
tent cities in LA, people crapping on the sidewalks in San Francisco, dirty needles everywhere. I mean, this is a wealthy state that is being so mismanaged. And then you've got the electric company saying that they're going to shut off power because it's fire season. I mean, how is this even an option? And then what happens? Surprisingly, right after they cut the power off, fires spring out everywhere. What a surprise. I mean, I'm telling you that there's some connection here between these two things. When you've got power companies involved acting in ways that are totally illogical and doing things that are out of character like this, and then all of a sudden random fires start to spring out, it's putting more credibility into those directed energy theories that are out there about how the original campfire started last year, the ones that spread for weeks and weeks or months. It was on fire, and killed a bunch of people, and there's people that are saying this fire was abnormal in its origins.
Here we go. Welcome back, and I can't quite believe this, but last segment already with Charlie Robinson. Where has the time gone, man? I mean, I love hanging out with you once a month, Charlie, but it's almost as if as each show goes by, the time speeds up. So remember, folks, please check out Charlie's work over at the Octopus of Global Control.com. Follow him over on Facebook and on Twitter as well, because Charlie's got one of these keen eyes for decoding what's going on in the current events. So much so that he could probably give us a detailed description of the virtual cell that Mark Zuckerberg's got over at the Facebook Central there, because you've spent so much time in there, dude. And you should really take that as a mark of respect. You really should.
For sure. I'm you know, every time I get put in Facebook jail, it's because of something that I posted 2 years ago. It's not even recent stuff. It's just stuff that I put on in 2017 that has to do with that school in Connecticut. It's like they have it out for me. They go back retroactively, go through my posts. Actually, not even posts, just pictures that I put up. I got put in Facebook.
You're on the same list as that dude from Texas, man. I'm telling you.
I got put in Facebook jail for 30 days for putting a meme on in my photos in Facebook about that school. I didn't create it. I didn't even write a comment.
You thought criminal. You thought criminal.
And that was enough. That was enough to get me put in jail for 30 days, which is super annoying. I mean, it's not like I'm running a Facebook business or anything like I did, have to have it. But, so.
You're not on the hook to Zook. You like that?
No, I'm not on the hook to Zook at all.
Good man. Good man. That is a creepy character. But talking of creepy characters, how about we go over now to the virtual crime lab? Yes, indeed. So what I'm going to do here is, if I can remember how to do this rightly. Now, let's see. There we go. We take this away. Yep, there we go, Charlie. See? The crime scene is upon us. So we start here, right? And this is something that kind of formed in my mind a little while ago when the whole Greta Thunberg started coming around. And there was something really kind of troubling me, because it was almost as if I kind of recognized her. And then what happened was a series of midnight phone calls and meetings in underground car parks and meeting up with deep state intel sources. They were deep state intel sources. How do I know that? Because they told me on the internet, okay? And they told me a couple of things to look at. And would you believe it, when I went and connected these dots, they make a compelling case for something. So first up, my Navy intel guy who contacted me in the dead of night called himself Carrotfoot. Obviously, Charlie, code name for something, right? I didn't want to ask. You don't ask somebody called Carrotfoot what the score is with this kind of name. So he says, Kev, I know you're onto something here. We know with our brain reading technology that you're putting together pieces of the jigsaw that we would rather you not put together. And he says, there is a bigger story. And take a look at this character here. Herman von Rompuy. Now, earlier in the show, we mentioned the Club of Rome. And this character here, who used to be the head of the EU, well, he is indeed a member of said Club of Rome. So I'm thinking to myself right now, this is a good start. But why are the deep state in the EU telling me not to look at von Rompuy? And then they said, well, it doesn't stop there, because he connects to something very important indeed. So I'm starting to get to the crime board, and I'm waiting. Really had to wait a couple of days for the next shoe to drop. The kill brackets came in the middle of a story I was reading somewhere. It was all coded, Charlie, right? But they said to me, now take a look at Momo. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, right. So we've got something going on here, Charlie. We've got a really uncanny resemblance for a start between Momo and Van Rompuy. I don't know if they're maybe like half brother, half sister. Maybe one's uncle's also his mum or his dad. I don't know what's going on in that family there. Maybe they're just truly independent characters. And that's when I got another piece of information, because they told me that these two here one time met at the ranch of Epstein. Remember the breeding ranch that they would all go to? And then, not only that, they provided me with this photographic evidence. Look, you've got Momo taking a butcher's at Van Rompuy's Momo as he's using the toilet. So this year, we're starting to connect the dots. Now we're starting to see where this is going. And can you actually imagine then? Can you imagine what the product of a breeding experiment between Momo and Van Rompuy would actually look like? Have you ever considered this heinous actual experiment? Well, there it is there. Because I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the Scooby-Doo moment where I pull the mask of Greta Thunberg and I produce to you Greta von Rompuy. Yes, she's the product of a sexual relationship between Van Rompuy and Momo. That's what I think. That's what I've been told.
You know who spilled the beans on Van Rompuy is Nigel Farage.
I see now. It sounded like Nige. It sounded like Nige when he called himself Carrot Foot, but I didn't want to say Nige. Is that you? Come on, Nige.
He's the one that's described him as having the personality of a damp rag.
Oh, that is one of the best speeches ever.
Just destroyed him in front of the, where was that? Was it EU?
Yeah, that was the EU. And in fact, I think that actually deserves to be looked at. Farage von Rompuy, yes.
Say what you want about Nigel Farage, but you do not want to get into a pissing contest with him because he will destroy you. He just, here you go.
Here you go, folks, yeah. You might not have heard this before. It's one of these timeless classics.
It's so great. I love this. I love Nigel for this.
There we go, folks. You ready?
You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you.
Go on, Nige.
I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy's not popular with you lot.
That's a man that's sitting there really wishing that he could disappear up his own asshole right now. He's wishing he could, like, just go quantum and disappear out of existence, doesn't he?
And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous, and I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states.
And to father Greta Thunberg along the way, no less, Nigel.
You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country.
And the centre of some really, really evil people trafficking rings in the world.
Really dark stuff going on.
But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying, we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better. You have the...
Absolutely fantastic. Fantastic.
And remember what I talked about early on about Dr. Alexander King founding the Committee of 300. Well, Van Rompuy is a member of that as well. He is in there with all of the kings and princes and extremely wealthy business people and ambassadors and all of that. Van Rompuy is a part of that group.
Rumpy Pumpy?
Yep.
Yep. So do you like the crime board? I like the crime board, dude.
I do. I think you're onto something here.
Yeah, definitely. Onto a lot of speculation that goes nowhere. But hey, and like I say, if you hear that conspiracy being pushed now from now on in, I've not like copyrighted it or trademarked it, so we can't claim it as my very own. But you know where it came from. So Charlie, where are we going to go in this last segment of the show? You did mention something to me during the break, and I'm danged if I can remember what it was.
Pacific Gas and Electric.
California power outages.
Yeah.
That's it. Speaking to Nano yesterday, she basically informed me what's going on because when I went looking, I just kept hearing the same thing from the mainstream. They were just parroting the statement that was coming from PG&E. So Charlie, as somebody who's from California originally, tell us what's going on in your opinion.
Well, I mean, it's not normal for electric companies to just shut off the power to hundreds of thousands of people, unless you're in the middle of like a you've got a massive snowstorm coming in, and you're going to cut the power just so that all the lines, when they get, if they get taken down, they don't start fires or something like that. I could maybe kind of wrap my head around that, but that's not what's going on here. They just decided that it's a fire season in these areas, and so we're going to turn the power off preemptively, like in advance. We're just going to cut everybody's power. Well, it didn't take too long before it killed a guy, an old guy who has an oxygen tank plugged in, and power goes out and his oxygen went off and he died. This is Pacific Gas and Electric, which is the largest power company in California. And California has been so mismanaged. It's a shame to see it, because it's a beautiful state. It's, it's got everything that, from Northern California in Lake Tahoe and these beautiful mountain areas all the way down to beaches in Southern California and Central California. You have grows a ton of food for the whole, not just the United States, but it exports it. Fruits, vegetables, you name it. California is a massive industry. Then you've got Silicon Valley, you've got Hollywood, you've got LA, San Diego, all of these things. And Pacific Gas and Electric is a company that has been involved in lawsuits, major lawsuits, for the fact that they were involved. They were responsible. They were found responsible for their power lines starting the fires that spread throughout the state last summer. And, they went on for weeks and weeks and months in some places and killed a bunch of people. Pacific Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy. They had one of their members drop off of the board earlier this year, who was a Rothschild mergers and acquisition banker that was sitting on their board. So he dropped off. There's some shenanigans going on. I'm not going to pretend to know it all. I don't know exactly what is going on here, except I can say with confidence that this is not normal. This is not a normal way to handle this. This is like saying, it snows in Boston, and in the winter, and so therefore we're going to close all the roads in advance because we don't want people to have to get around and drive in snow. You're like, what are you talking about? How is that saving any? How is this protecting anyone? Maybe if PG&E spent a little bit more money taking care of their infrastructure and updating their equipment, maybe they wouldn't, their power lines wouldn't spark fires like they have. This is a big problem. And I know that, the conspiratorial part of my brain really wants to go into some dark places here and see if this isn't part of a much larger agenda. And what we've talked about earlier was Agenda 2030. And I wonder if there are connections between Agenda 2030 and the clearing out of certain areas in California.
I know I've seen one map last year that, listen, it certainly appears that way when you look at the maps and you line them up. And again, though, and Charlie, I'm sure you back me up on this, we have to be careful because just because it appears to be ticking the boxes, again, it's that confirmation bias. You hear there's a Rothschild on the board. It's easy to let the conspiratorial side go loose, really connect dots that may or may not be there. And at the same time, I can also see it from the safety standpoint, sort of. But if you're going to be that kind of diligent and looking out for people, then realistically, you're going to have to turn it off 365 days a year because you've got trees that can fall down at any time and that could cause a fire, Charlie. It's kind of ridiculous. And watching the whole governor or whoever he is talking and pretending he's outraged at this company, it just felt, again, so staged, so fake, because these people, they're all in cahoots together. And again, I think this is kind of, what's even more important. And again, if you're in the middle of these power cuts, you'll be thinking there's nothing more important than this power cut right now, Kev. You should try being here. I get that. But California on the whole, Charlie, I mean, for the place where we get our Hollywood movies and everything else going on, it's absolutely falling apart. It's like a shanty town in places. What the hell's going on there?
Yeah, it's sad. I went to USC, which is in downtown Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. I was there when the riots happened. It was pretty apocalyptic at that time. And we would see from time to time, homeless people right near our campus. They weren't homeless necessarily by choice. They had mental illness. I mean, there was a lot of this, and we would kind of, joke that they're just dropping them off. They're just taking them from the nut house and dropping them off, all around town. We had no idea how correct we were about this. I mean, we were literally just joking about that. But it turned out later that there were massive cuts to the budgets in California to mental health facilities, and also some in coordination with some changes in the laws. And they were just taking people out of these mental health facilities, loading them into buses, opening up the back of the buses, and just dumping them onto Skid Row, which is about 4 or 5 miles north of USC. They would just leave them there. And they, of course, clicked up and started to live on the streets, and that became Skid Row that people had talked about. Well, Skid Row is now expanded, not just, width and not just east and west, but north and south as well. It's become this gigantic encampment of homeless people filled with tents and rats and what Dr. Drew has described as bubonic plague. And I mean, this is like medieval times back there. I mean, we're talking about a level of sanitation that is completely avoidable. It's definitely third world. And what are we doing? What are we worried about? You've got people in San Francisco are now experiencing the same problem. People crapping on the streets, right in front of the sidewalks, right in front of people. You're either a millionaire or you're a homeless person. And it's just this weird dystopian nightmare that's blending together. And you've got Gavin Newsom in charge of this all, and he looks good, man. He looks like Gordon Gekko, and he's out there and he's going to fix stuff and everything. It's all theater once again. It's political shenanigans. You've got Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and all these people, these Democrats, and I'm neither Democrat nor a Republican. So if I criticize Democrats, don't think I'm a Republican. But it's been democratically controlled, and it's gone to hell in a handbasket real quick under their leadership. They need a change of leadership. Pacific Gas and Electric, if you're worried that your company is just going to keep causing fires, get out of the electricity business. Give it up to someone else. Sell your company to somebody else that's going to come in and actually run it properly. To shut down power just arbitrarily and think that that's the solution to the problem is insane. This is crazy people thinking right here. This is like how lunatics run operations. This is insane. Gavin Newsom in San Francisco and his whole organization, it's not as if they don't notice that there's a million homeless people living everywhere. And this is sad. I'm not trying to take it out. I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful to the homeless community, because
these people are being used in the same
they don't
way.
Want to be there for the most part.
They're being used in a different way, as a political kind of vehicle, a tool. Yeah. They're being used in this game. It's disgusting. It truly is, but it shocks me to see where California is. And somebody asking, what's your take on whether America is still one of the best countries in the world, Charlie?
I go back to that Jeff Bridges soliloquy that he did in, I think it was West Wing? No, it was a movie where he talked about that, where they asked him the question about that, is America the greatest country in the world? And his first response was, well, it used to be. I mean, it used to be. And we've been living on our reputation for a long, long time as the greatest country in the world. I haven't seen a lot of greatness lately. What I've seen is indiscriminate bombing of countries that don't fall in line with the U.S. empire agenda. I see the hypocrisy between us claiming that we don't support dictators while simultaneously supporting Saudi Arabia and their dictators there, and really anybody who's got a dictator in the Middle East that will buy our arms and will toe the line in our agenda. I see the United States falling in terms of education levels to levels that are embarrassing. Flint still does not have clean drinking water, although Elon Musk is working hard to try and make that happen through water filtration systems. Can't count on the government for anything. We have a massive problem with opioids. We've always had a drug problem. We love drugs in this country. The CIA imports them because they know that we love them so much they can make a fortune off of this. We haven't been great in a long time, and I take no pleasure in saying that as an American. I'm embarrassed of it. But the reality of the situation is that we have a lot of fixing to do, and we're so quick to go around and say this country has to do what we're saying, and this country needs to get their act together, and they need to this, it's always external. We need to look at ourselves. We need to focus on our own problems. We got so many of them. It's like the person that is always criticizing others, but doesn't take the time to realize that they need to work on themselves. I mean, obviously we all need to work on ourselves as just human beings.
It's
and
deflection.
You and I criticize a lot of people. Of course, we this is what we do. We're coming on here to sort of point this out. We're not perfect. We have a lot of
what do you mean? What do you mean, Charlie? Of course we're perfect. No. But no, what you're talking about is classic deflection, right? You transfer all your problems onto somebody else, and the last thing you look at is your own problems. Absolutely. So I hope that answered the listener's question. And don't forget, folks, coming right up after this today, we've got Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew on the way on tfrlive.com. So if you're watching the simulcast of this, what I would love you to do is head on over to tfrlive.com right after this show. There's another chat room over there as well where you can all continue to hang out. And Charlie, what else have you been keeping your eye on then in the world? You've been on with Sean Atwood. I think I was speaking to you about this during one of the breaks. Very good work indeed, sir. And anyone who isn't watching Sean Atwood, you really should be, even aside from his continuous brilliant work on Epstein. The true crime stuff, me and you are both fans of that, Charlie. I love watching the documentaries on TV. And Sean, of course, I mean, his own personal story. He had his time in that jail over in America, in Arizona. Sheriff Joe. Crazy times, brother. But Sean's a really good guy.
Sean's great. I did a video with him that came out a week ago, actually a week ago exactly, and it has 100,000 views because he's got a massive audience. And we talked about Epstein. We're going to do a follow-up video in the next couple of days, answering the questions that people left in the comment section. I mentioned to you I had a chance this last weekend. I went to not this last weekend, but the one before that. I went to a wedding. Was seated next to Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
You're going to do this. You're going to name drop all these people.
I'm going to name drop. Oh, absolutely.
Go for it, man. Gage, it's your moment.
I'm like, I love your stuff. I love your work. I put you in my book. I put an entire chapter called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and then I get randomly seated next to him at dinner. What are the chances of that? So, once again, if you're not familiar, if you're interested in 9/11 and you want to dig into some of the details, the nitty gritty, the science behind it, go to ae911truth.org and check out their amazing work there. Richard's just a phenomenal guy. We chatted for 2 hours. I think I might have worn his ear out.
Did you stalk him?
Probably
Robinson,
trying to get away from me.
Robinson, were you stalking the guy? Did you like?
I mean, had I known he would have been there, I would have been super excited in advance. But then when we're just there, it was the wedding for Benny Wills from Joy Camp, a wonderful guy. Hopefully you'll get him on at some point. He's an activist and if you've ever watched any of those Joy Camp videos, then he's a conspiracy guy in that. He's the greatest. So yeah, that's been keeping me busy. Just out here trying to bring to light some of the hypocrisy in this world, make it available, make it so that we could have these discussions about it, so that we can recognize it the next time around.
Your book puts you in a unique position, really. Well, maybe not unique, but definitely a lucky position, because you catalogued, you documented all these different quotes and all these different parts of the octopus, the New World Order. And now it must be like almost ticking off events when you see them happening, because you'll be able to say, well, it fits into that chapter of the book, or it kind of ties to this quote over here. So really, that's why I love working with you. I love bringing you on, Charlie. And there's always enough in between shows for us to probably do 4 or 5 shows. That's why when we do get you on, it's just so much to talk about. And I think next time we'll have a little look at the gender Olympics that goes on around the world. I think that's how I'll title that one. Gender Olympics. So undoubtedly will trigger people. the next time myself and Charlie team up. And of course, we wear our toxic beards with pride, folks. We truly do.
You got to get one of those Ryan Gable shirts. It's Moth Ma'am.
Is that not just absolutely classic?
I couldn't stop laughing when I saw that. I thought it was perfect.
No, brilliant. It really is brilliant. So yeah, next time you come on, we'll get into that. We can also get into a story that I was seeing today where it's not just one story. It's almost like a push, the same as the climate change. Only this time it's talking about a global ID system. Because, you know, you don't want the children to be trafficked, do you? Again, using the children to drive through something, Charlie, that would have been a huge part of your book, a global kind of microchip, a tagging system. It's always been coming, and now they're pushing for it now. So, yeah, we'll have lots to talk about. Any shows you're going to be on in the near future? You're prolific, man. You're everywhere. You're like a virus.
I am a virus. I'm just going to do Sean's show again.
Awesome. I'll check that out and I'll let everyone know when it's on. And I'll share a link to that when it happens. Stay tuned for Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew for Quantum Connections. I'll be back tomorrow night with Danny Arnold McKenney. I remembered the name off the top of my head there. That was a good one. So wherever you are, make it TFR. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about time, timelines, magnetics, 2012, energies.
Ooh, I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be.
I could go down that rabbit hole, and I want to make sure I say this. I know that some of the topics that we talk about are a bit dark, and I know that we are, we're going hard about climate change and everything here, but I think it's important for people to realize that part of the reason why I want to do what I can to make people aware of this is so that you recognize these scams the next time around when they come up. You'll start to see some themes peek their head. And if you know what to look for, you can recognize it right away. When you see a child being used to push an agenda, you see a coordination by the media just all at once, all about the same thing.
Think of that David Hogg character.
For sure. Great example. Wonderful example. Guy comes out of nowhere, has very questionable ties. Parents have ties to intelligence. His story doesn't make sense. He contradicts himself in his interview, saying in one interview that he was at home and he got on his bike and decided to ride there as fast as he could. A second interview, both nationally televised, he says that he was in his environmental studies class. And you're caught in a lie right there. And you dig into these things. So I'm not trying to be cynical necessarily. I just think that it's important that if we understand how this game is played, the use of kids to push an agenda, we'll be able to recognize it easier the next time around, because there'll be a next time.
This is how I was able to recognize 7-7 in the UK. It's exactly how I recognized the red flags, that the indicators that what we were seeing was what they wanted us to be told. It didn't quite match up with what was happening. You had the drills and everything. And that's
just look at Epstein. Cameras malfunctioning, guards falling asleep, sketchy visits from people.
You've answered a question that I asked you earlier on in the show, and it's been something on my mind for a while. And it's not that, we're getting egotistic in any way, shape, or form, but because of what Charlie's saying here, you do start to recognize it. And I said to you at one point, it's almost as if they're getting sloppy, Charlie. I don't think it is that they're getting sloppy. It's because we know the steps that they take. It's because it's so obvious once you've had it explained to you often enough that it's not that they're getting sloppy. It's exactly the same tactics they used, only now you can recognize them. So, 9/11, Epstein, all of these things are always good to revisit because we've always got new people coming to the show. We've always got new people starting to question what's really going on.
And it's not disrespectful to question the official narrative. I think it's important for people to remember that you'll have people that will say, how dare you say that about Greta? You challenge her. She's out there. She's fighting for this planet. And what are you doing? You're just criticizing her. I'm not criticizing her. I'm just acknowledging that there is a bigger agenda that's going on here, that there is a hidden hand at play that isn't really as hidden anymore as it used to be, and that these things are manufactured. that's how you wind up on all of the television news at the same time. That's how you wind up being able to speak in front of the United Nations. That's how you wind up, becoming the face of a global movement. It's not accidental and it's not organic. It's manufactured. The question is who's manufacturing it and what are they doing? What is the plan? And with something like climate change in this whole thing, they are looking to terrorize the people, for one, into thinking that the world is going to end. It's creating neurological, it's like issues with children that are really freaking out.
Eco-anxiety. When the hell did
eco-anxiety?
When did that become a thing?
Well, soon there'll be a vaccine for it. Don't worry.
Probably.
Yeah. This is how it's done. It's incremental. It won't all happen all at once. They're not going to, like anything, if it's a climate tax, carbon tax, or something like this. If they do it carefully and they let this thing bake long enough, they'll get to a point where you will be demanding it. And that's when they really have got you. When you're actually demanding your own enslavement, or you're demanding that your rights be taken away. We've got to ban all guns. Okay, I understand. People have been shot by guns. We hear that, but you're now voluntarily giving up rights, and you're demanding that they take your rights. Well, at some point that will go wrong. You'll wish you hadn't done that. And with regard to this eco-fascism that they're putting in play, it's going to end badly.
Right? Look at this, and this is a kind of it's a hard-hitting way to finish the show, but it backs up everything that me and Charlie have been saying, and it's all the way from down under. Good friend Mammoth Hunter in the chat room. And I'll leave you to think about this, folks, because we talk about how they're brainwashing children, and Mammoth says that my daughter was crying the other day, over it, and she's only 10 years old. Said Vetch.
You're the best, forget the rest. Hashtag 76ers.
Yes, it was a good year, 76, but yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, Charlie, that brings it home, right? When you've got, daughters, children of listeners to the show that are coming home that stressed out that they're literally crying about what they've been told at school.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because you've got to tell your kids the world is not going to end in 12 years. But there is something to being aware of the environment and to not, contribute negatively to this planet, to pollution and muddying up the waterways and the air and all this stuff. But just be very careful, because anytime they roll out this solution to something, the problem reaction solution component, the solution will always include something that will look along the lines of less rights for you, less money for you, restrictions on freedom, mobility. There'll be the poisoning of certain words that you're not allowed to say. Some phrases will be off limits. And then you'll also notice that there are some people that are above reproach that you are not allowed to criticize. Those are all red flags. And so have these conversations with your kids. Tell them to be mindful of what they're doing, but they don't need to cry. They don't need to glue themselves to the doors of some place to protest this. They don't need to get on an airplane. I tell you what, if I'm on an airplane and one of these activists gets on the airplane and starts shouting about the world's going to end in 12 years, I'm going to choke them out and drag them off of the plane.
I will glue them to the toilet in the plane.
I will glue them to the tarmac and run over them with the airplane. I mean, this is just madness. But it also goes to show how easily we can be manipulated into thinking it's all going to end. People have been yelling that the end is near for forever. This is part of humanity. We get caught up in that. And it's interesting, too. The idea of that the world is all going to end is fascinating. It's awful, but it's fascinating. And but I would just quote Public Enemy and say, don't believe the hype.
Well, over in the UK, before we go, I had to laugh last week because they were telling us that the Mayans, the people behind the 2012 calendar and everything else, they just disappeared overnight. And that happened 1,800 years ago because, wait for it, they created their own climate change. Yes, they caused climate change, and that's what led to the Mayans just disappearing overnight. So unless you want to go the way of the Mayans, Charlie, you better mend your ways.
I think Graham Hancock would disagree with that theory.
I couldn't believe it when I was reading it. I'm thinking to myself, yep, it's the Daily Mail. It's not like some spoof satire site. And I'm thinking, really? So nobody bought that, right? Everyone would have been laughing at it. And that's the day after that. I don't find it any coincidence that they went for the emotions. Well, if you don't care about the Mayans, the penguins are all dying. So they started on the penguin propaganda. So, folks, check out Charlie's book over at the Octopus of Global Control.com. I urge you all to check that out. Charlie will be back next month. I'll be joined tomorrow by Danny Arnold McKenney. Yes, I got it absolutely correct this time. We'll be getting into all the magnetics, all the weird woo. Time, multiverse. Anyone like the TV show Fringe? Yes, indeed. We're going pure, unadulterated pseudoscience tomorrow, Charlie. I wear my pseudoscientist hat with pride. Goes with my beard. Even actually goes with my blue shirt as well. So I want to thank you, big man. It's been a blast yet again. No doubt we'll be ripping somebody else a new one come 1 month's time. So I'll play some really cool music. Some people call it retro porn music. I find it more kind of relaxation tunes. I don't know about you. I'll let you decide when we're playing out here. But folks, I'll be back tomorrow on the Safe Space, and that's 5 p.m. in the UK, midday on the East Coast, and 9 a.m. on the West Coast. So until then, I bid you all farewell, and I will leave you with Joe Joseph's favourite track. Come on, Charlie, that's some music, man. Can you not just picture Ron Jeremy coming into the room right now? He's kicking back with Kissinger, Rockefeller. Who knew? So Ron Jeremy's in the club.
I'll tell you what. When I was 20, I was a valet parker at this restaurant, and I valet parked 2 famous people's cars while I was there. Buzz Aldrin,
the Buzz,
number 1, and Peter North, number 2.
Dude, you're rubbing.
I was so excited.
No wonder, man.
Holy shit! It's Peter North
and the Buzz, dude. Some people don't even think he's real.